Told through the stories of today's leaders in finance, tech, real estate, culture, and sustainability. We share the boundless and beautiful technology of nature, where health is the new luxury and opportunities for a better future are being crafted by the second. This is Planet Gold, with your host, Enzo Di Taranto.
Welcome to this new edition of Planet Gold, my eco podcast to re-engineer the global climate agenda at the Horizon 2030. I'm here today with Andreas Deutschmann, who is the managing director of a private investment bank boutique based in New York, specialized in impact investing. So I'm very pleased to dive deep today into the realm of the global climate finance and see what are the trends towards financing different verticals of sustainability, from clean energy to extreme technologies, climate technologies overall. So Andreas is a much sought after speaker in many global events worldwide. He was recently in Riyadh. We met in Dubai during COP28 a few years ago. We have been together last year during the New York Climate Week, attending several events. And Andreas will be also a keynote speaker during my next event at the Cannes Film Festival in May, with a keynote on the application of AI to sustainability. So we are really here approaching the cutting edge of the science and technology related to climate. But without any further notice, I would like to ask Andreas to introduce yourself. And particularly, Andreas, I know your life story, which is very interesting. But I would like you to share with our audience what has been your journey, how you, reached New York in a very elite position in the investment industry, and what has triggered your passion for impact investing.
Sure. Thank you, Enzo. Always good to spend time with you. Maybe just going back to the very beginning, my father immigrated from Austria to Chicago, where he was an iron worker. My mother immigrated from Germany, where she was a housewife. When I was born, my mother couldn't speak English, so German was my first language. And I was also, I had two younger brothers, one 3 years younger, Michael, one 6 years younger, Christopher. We were a very religious family, going to masses weekly. And there was a heavy predominance of sport and also school through my family background. And just as a little background, when I was 5 years old, I went skiing with my mother. And I remember going inside because I was cold and I wanted some hot chocolate. And as I was sipping my hot chocolate, the ski patrol brought in on a stretcher my mother, who had broken her leg in her attempts to get us out and skiing. And so skiing was a big factor. Soccer was a big factor. I did play for the U.S. Olympic team in soccer, was also a Midwest downhill alpine champ, and also was an international rugby player. And if you wanted to go into all that, we can certainly do that. In terms of what got me into sustainability, I was always very interested in STEM type technologies, particularly physics and math, and building things, skateboards, go-karts with my friends. And later, just to give you some background, living in New York City, in my building, which is near Broadway, I have directors, playwrights, actresses, singers, musicians, and as a consequence of that, later in life, did get exposed to stand-up comedy, reading for parts in plays, as well as for singing parts for Broadway musicals. So that's kind of the background. In terms of the journey into what would ultimately become finance, I went to the University of Illinois, where I got a degree in a CPA degree, and also one in accountancy. My parents wanted me to get a job when I came out of school, and that was the #1 accounting school in the country at the time, and it was almost guaranteed if you went to the accounting curriculum, you got a job. Funnily enough, I had funded all of my college tuition. I was a lifeguard. I worked at Burger King. I worked in a grocery store. I worked as a bricklayer's mason. I worked in a machine shop 55 hours a week in the summers and covered all my tuition. And yet my parents made sure that I had to cover my tuition. Apparently, they wanted to make sure I also got out of the house. So it was a good upbringing, and I'm very happy for that. In addition to the University of Illinois, I got a degree at the University of Chicago, 3 MBAs, one in finance, one in international business, one in economics. And about a couple of years ago, I was an adjunct professor at the Central European University in Budapest, Hungary, where I taught the venture capital course for the executive MBA program. In addition to that, while I was working, I was a member of the Council of Foreign Relations, where I met a lot of important world leaders that were very influential on me, economics, sustainability, climate finance, all included. In terms of what I did for work, and this we're talking 2 or 3 decades now, I led teams in accounting, valuation, due diligence, investment selection, portfolio management, risk management, and financial modeling. And I did that as a managing director for JP Morgan, a vice president for John Hancock, and a manager for Deloitte and Touche. And I carried out those duties, and this is probably worth mentioning, in Chicago, Boston, New York, Luxembourg, Vienna, Zurich, Singapore, and Tokyo, which gave me a great exposure to different business climates, cultures, languages, ethnicities, and which I was always very thankful for that experience. And I think that helps me a lot today when interacting with international folks on the climate agenda itself.
Absolutely.
Maybe a final note, my financial background in economics, I've covered all global asset classes, interest rates, equities, commodities, foreign exchange, credit, and the like. And I did that for both public investments and both private. So that kind of positions me well in terms of negotiating climate finance and other types of structures when it comes to the environment.
So hold on. So there is so much to say and to discuss. But Andreas, let me crystallize 3 topics that you mentioned among your vast experience, so that we can like dive a little bit deeper in one. If I can categorize as a sport, and I tell you why I say that. The second one could be your passion for arts and filming. And the third one is obviously finance and impact investing. So let me start with your experience as an athlete. You know that my effort to reinvent the narrative on climate is this mantra that I created and in which I identify myself so deeply, which is the planet through the body. And actually, this is also the title of my forthcoming book, which explains the planetary crisis through the disconnection between our body and our planet. What that means is that, like, you are drinking now water, I guess, from a plastic bottle. And for us, drinking microplastics while we drink water has become the new normalcy. You see, because as humanity, we have become like unaware or even blind of the fact that we are plastifying our organism. And it's not only by drinking water from plastic bottles, but it's also because we have lost this awareness of the air that we breathe, of the food that we eat with all the pesticide and chemicals that we ingest. So that has become the normal for, at least in industrialized countries. And I think that this is the reason why when, I say maybe we don't do that, you and me, but as humanity, we throw plastics in the oceans, or we, use contaminants all day long, and we are not even aware. That's a subconscious behavior, you see? So for me, the solution to expand again our consciousness and raise our awareness of the dire state of the planet passes through the body. So when we become again conscious about our body, the energy of our body, then we also pay more attention to the natural elements of the cosmos, the air, the water, the earth, the temperature, the light, and then maybe this will be a generational paradigm shift, but next generations will be much more sensitive to destroying the planet, because when we destroy the planet, we destroy ourselves as a species, right? So that's my narrative. Now, you as an athlete and having very high awareness of your body, and knowing you, I know that you have that. So would you agree with my theory that we should push this narrative to change consumers' behaviors and therefore also the global economy?
Certainly in agreement. Just going back to when I was 15, I mentioned I worked at a grocery store, and back then almost all of the liquids, Coca-Cola, Sprite, you name it, Fanta, came in bottles, 12-ounce bottles. They're sold in 6-packs, and they were always returnable with either I think a 10-cent deposit. So I spent a good part of my time in that grocery store in the back, sorting the bottles. The Coke bottles had to go in the Coke box, Pepsi, and then they go back to the companies where they'd refill them and then put them out for sale back at the grocery store. So it was a cyclical system, which worked quite well. And then ultimately, tin and aluminum came into the picture, less and less glass bottle recycling in effect. And then ultimately, the plastic bottle came in. And this is kind of a function of, I think, convenience and perhaps a more economical way for producers of liquids to distribute it to us, the consuming public, and kind of put us in kind of this nefarious, perhaps, situation where plastic has become the norm. And is also produced from petroleum, and obviously we have some situations where petroleum is not helpful for the planet either. So yes, it's a big topic, and I definitely agree that we need to refocus our efforts or refocus our thinking on it as we go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, so that is, a topic that deserves or would deserve a focused conversation. But I just wanted to, because you mentioned your, athletic passion and career, I thought that it was appropriate to make that connection in this episode. So we will elaborate further, probably in next interviews. But let me move on and touch the second topic that you mentioned in your introduction, which is your talents and your interest and your fire for arts and filming. You mentioned Broadway. Despite you are not a professional actor, I know that you have inside your personality that angle that certainly you as a keynote speaker and as a thought leader in the climate space, that certainly helps because that makes presentations and speeches and conversations more engaging, more entertaining, and that's certainly an asset. Now, since you will be a keynote speaker during the next event at Cannes Film Festival, co-produced with the Better World Fund, that is actually a platform devoted to engage cinema and celebrities to promote social causes. And I am the sustainability strategist within that platform. And since 2016, we do events during the Cannes Film Festival, the Venice Film Festival. We have done it more in New York, in Paris, and so on. But my question for you is how you think we could further capitalize on arts and entertainment to divulgate the climate narrative in a more engaging and entertaining fashion.
Well, I think one way, and we see this, it's not a new way necessarily, is you look at people that are in the media, whether they're athletes or whether they're authors or whether they're musicians or whether they're actors or actresses, that they have a lot of power to steer the agenda. And you see that with athletes in commercials, for the most part, selling product, and others. But I think the idea is try to get people to back missions and maybe not products. Like a mission could be reduction of plastic, reintroduction of glass, maybe even reintroduction of aluminum to the extent that we can recycle it and come up with a cyclical type environmental system for it. But I see a lot of great merit to employing people with these types of media presences. So that would be kind of my first inclination.
No, that's true. You know that I launched this concept of celebrity diplomacy many years ago. I mean, I was still in my position as campaign manager of the United Nations Secretary General in New York. So the leverage that you have when you are in the office of the United Nations leadership is very high, and it was relatively easy to engage people like Jay-Z on a water campaign, or George Clooney on a humanitarian campaign, the Darfur, Angelina Jolie and Giorgio Armani supporting the efforts of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Lionel Messi working with UNICEF, and so on. But, a few of them, like Leonardo DiCaprio, I must admit, have a true passion and a true understanding of the climate crisis. And so they have used their powerful voice and platforms to support the dissemination of this message in a more engaging and entertaining fashion. But I think that this effort must be redoubled and must continue. So we count on your contribution as well on the 20th and 21st of May in beautiful Cannes and there the interesting thing will be that you will speak about the application of AI to sustainability, which is a totally new topic. I mean, there are very few people who really understand or even are thinking about this connection between AI and climate. So can you give us just a little, input about how you see AI and sustainability be connected, or more specifically, how AI can foster or enhance the climate agenda?
Sure. So if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, there's 17. And I've actually taken the time to use AI to kind of map out how AI can impact each one of those individual Sustainable Development Goals, starting with no poverty, zero hunger, and the rest. So there's the possibility to use AI for good, I would call it. And if you think about AI, some people say you can define it as chips, data, energy, an operating system, and some algorithms, or it's software and algorithms designed to simulate human intelligence. But what I think is most important is you can use it for any kind of problem to determine pattern recognitions, optimization, monitoring, measurement, tracking, and also decision making. And you can do it across large data sets, and you can do it very quickly and very cheaply. So it'll be great to implement AI in that regard. One thing I would mention is there was a gentleman, very well-known one, who said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." And that gentleman started his career in the post office as a clerk in Switzerland, and gained fame as he's currently known as Albert Einstein. So I think we really need to think a little bit more about how we're thinking about these problems. And so if you allow me to digress for a moment, if you think back in the late 1800s, when the Industrial Revolution started, many of the economists said, okay, we look at this economic growth or the system as land, labor, and capital. They all cost something. They allow us to achieve value, which we can monetize as revenues. And there's some subsequent expenses out there. And at the time, they acknowledged, in addition to land, labor, and capital, there are externalities to this three-pronged model. And that is pollution of the land, water, and the air. But at the time, the industrial status of the globe was so small, it wasn't really something we paid attention to. Now, over time, it's going to be such a big situation. And the question kind of becomes, in a very rude, crude approach, is who's going to pay for it all? And using the same kind of thinking may not get us there. So the hope is, in addition to attacking each of these SDGs, we can think a little bit broader about what kind of system do we need going forward to attack this issue. And then, in addition, I won't go into it right now, but just table for the moment. It's key to get the right implementation. There's a need to deal with vested interests, biases, and the unintended consequences as we go on this path to environmental cleanliness.
Very interesting. And you mentioned a pivotal issue, which is who pays for that. And my experience, my observation during the last, I should say, 5 or 6 years in particular, has been that the impact investing industry, if I can call it like that, has been moving towards financing sustainability in a much more conscious and informed way. If you see the evolution of family offices, for instance, I mean, family offices maybe 5 or 6 years ago, were not even thinking too much about investing in green and blue, and now you see that there are platforms like impact, like family offices for SDGs. You have families, important families like Daniel, the tobacco producers, who now really focus almost all their capitals and the investment decisions in the sustainable space. And we have so many more. We are now speaking about sustainable real estate, sustainable yachting, sustainable mining, and there are a lot of capitals moving there. You remember that at COP28 in Dubai, when we met, the concept, the topic of climate finance was very relevant, and there has been the Net Zero Banking Alliance effort that was launched in Glasgow in I think 2022, if I remember well. But anyway, there is a moment towards impact investing and climate finance. So you manage an investment bank yourself, so that's your space. So how, from the inside, you see these dynamics evolving?
I could give you perhaps a couple of examples of what we're working on. If you look at Sustainable Development Goal, good health and well-being, which covers healthcare, biotechnology, and life sciences, we are negotiating a capital raise for a company in the cancer research situation. This is kind of new, but if you recall, there's a lot of genomics and genomic testing done on mice for the purpose of determining on what ultimately happens with the chromosomes and what could potentially happen in humans as they test these various tracings amongst mice. The individual company we're looking at, and I can't name them because we haven't gone public with it yet, but they are using Methuselah flies that have a lifespan of about 30 to 40 days, but the gestation periods within those 30 to 40 days, such that you can determine chromosome changes 9 to 12 times faster than using laboratory mice at a much lower cost. And of course, we're using AI to assess, determine pattern recognition within those flies and so on and so forth. The other thing we're working on currently is if you look at SDG, Sustainable Development Goal number 4, quality education, we are working with a robotics company to develop, and we're fairly far along. We have prototypes, 3-foot tall robots, very non-threatening, not like a 6'4" Arnold Schwarzenegger Terminator, but they're able to go into hospitals where we have bedridden children, bedridden handicapped children, and through a screen on their chest, allow them to do take school courses and do it voice over. So if they're unable to use their limbs, they can still get educated. So these are kind of some of the programs we're working on. We do have another company that's an AGI, and so as opposed to AI, which I kind of loosely defined before, where you're given inputs and it basically gives you outputs. This gives you the ability to come up with some thinking, so it can kind of determine what the next tests will be to get you quicker to a potential solution. And that's something that we're hoping to get out in the next 6 months. So stay tuned on all that.
Absolutely. And we ask our audience on the Planet Good platform to stay tuned for updates on these cutting edge technologies, which brings me, and moving towards wrapping up our conversation, dear Andreas, to what we said at the onset of this episode, which is the concept of the planet through the body again, because another assumption of my narrative, that I'm trying to re-engineer, to reinvent the narrative around climate that's, has been failing certainly during the last years, at least from a political perspective, becoming, too much politicized and polarized, especially in the United States, as you well know. But I think that this connection between sustainability and longevity is critical, because if you think, well, from a common sense perspective, a human being, as organisms, we can only be healthy and longeve if we absorb clean natural elements. So it's clean water, clean air, clean food. And we have this consciousness about our interaction with the light, with the darkness. So we cannot be unhealthy if, as humanity, we reestablish this proper connection between the cells of our body and the cells of the planet. And so the work that you are doing with your investment bank is critical to identify the technologies that obviously lead the way in terms of R&D, but also make for normal people easier to drink clean water, to breathe, clean air, and to eat clean food. You see, and it's all, especially in this new high automated and in the next future robotized economy, we can use technologies to clean up the planet, clean up the industrial system, the agricultural system, and so on. So your work is very, very critical. I just wanted to highlight again this connection between longevity and sustainability, which, by the way, are two of the fastest growing industries in the global economy. So it makes very much sense to interconnect them, considering that they are totally, there is a dichotomy between the two. They are going almost in two different directions. But we look forward to hearing more about your advancement in this field, and thank you for sharing those with us today. So, Andreas, I have a question that I make to all my guests on this platform, which is the following. So, imagine you have a magic wand that you have no limitations in terms of money, human resources, political access, technological advancements, and so on. So in the ideal world, in an ideal situation, if you would have all these resources and you could take 2 or 3 key decisions to move the global climate agenda to the next level, what would you do?
How many wishes do I get with the wand? No, so I would say that there's been a great focus when it comes to at least energy on the supply and technologies to get greener, if you will. But I think we should be thinking also on the demand side, at least in the country I live in. We use energy as a convenience. We love to consume it, and it's almost like a status. So I think we should keep thinking about not only the supply, but also a focus on the demand. And then getting back to what the Einstein quote, we can't get out of the problems we have today if we use the same thinking that we used when we created them. I think that's an area that certainly lends a lot of credence in my mind. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we need to work with vested interests, make sure we're not creating additional biases, kind of keep your head up for unintended consequences, and look forward to more technological developments.
So what you say that your focus would be to accelerate the energy transition towards renewables. Is that correct?
Yes, I could speak at greater length and give you statistics on it if you want to right now. Otherwise, yeah, I agree.
I mean, if you would like to elaborate a little bit more about this concept, I think it's very important.
So in 2022, the amount of energy consumed by the United States of America was 94 quadrillion British thermal units. A quadrillion is a number with 15 zeros after it. To count to a 94 quadrillion would take you 2.89 billion years. Just by way of contrast, this planet has been around for 4.5 billion years. So in terms of 2022, 79% of our energy in the US was fossil fuels. That's oil, that's charcoal, that's natural gas. And then 10% was nuclear and 9% was renewables. Move that forward to 2023, the 79% fossil fuels is now 81%. So you're thinking, wow, that it moved up, but not much. But for the US, the largest user of energy, that's a huge amount. And so renewables dropped by 1%, nuclear by 1%. So the other thing to think about the US energy consumption is that 23% of the energy gets lost or wasted in our electrical grid. 23% in and of itself may not sound very large, but that's enough to power France for a year. So there's a lot of wins we can make with the proper direction, and hopefully also with the combination of AI and thinking out of the box in different ways that we haven't in the past.
That's very interesting. Let me finish with another this conversation with another key point that you mentioned, which is the demand side, because another pillar of my vision of the new climate agenda is one, as I told you, conceiving the planet or perceiving and interacting with the planet through our body, I think that will solve a lot of problems. And the other one is to use consumers' behavior to change production systems and policies. Because as you well know, the market rules, right? So the big industries like food, energy, fashion, tourism, hospitality, they are real estate, they are all moving towards sustainability. I think because they are reacting to consumers' behaviors. So there are more educated consumers globally. Internet has helped a lot to expand the educational grid worldwide. And so especially new generations are more sensitive to, to don't use too much fast fashion or fast food. And I mean, I'm still making these optimistic assessments. That will take a generation or two. But I think that if we converge more efforts towards influencing consumers' behaviors so that indirectly we also influence the supply side, I think that's another key of our work. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of like you made the body analogy, and I think about, okay, the body inhales and exhales. There's a yin and a yang, just like there's supply and demand. And we've got to work on both those fronts.
Wonderful. Andreas, I really enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to seeing you and listening to your wisdom again in Cannes next month. If you can join us in Dubai next week for the Net Zero conference, also please do so. And I would like to thank you, first of all, for the work that you do. You are certainly an influential figure in the climate space, particularly in the finance space. And I think that we need more and more voices like yours to educate others who are not maybe so knowledgeable about these issues. But I believe in the goodness of human spirit and human nature. And I'm sure that if, the rich and the powerful of this world, they understand a little bit better these issues, they will do what they can to, go beyond profit only, right? To do good, as you said, AI for good. I should say finance for good as well. Anything else you would like to add?
No, I would just like to thank you for having me on today, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Wonderful. Thank you, Andreas, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Bye-bye.